I woke up that Tuesday morning to find my gate code had been changed, and when I drove up to the entrance of Meadowbrook Estates in Scottsdale, Arizona, my car sat there like an idiot while the keypad blinked red at me, refusing entry to my own home. I'm Sebastian Xavier, and I've lived in this gated community for 3 years. I'm a software developer who works from home, which means I don't leave the neighborhood much. But when I do, I expect to be able to get back in. I punched in my code 3 more times, each attempt more aggressive than the last, but the gate stayed firmly closed. A line of cars was forming behind me, and I could see Mrs. Patricia Henderson from the HOA board standing at the guardhouse with her arms crossed, watching me with what I can only describe as smug satisfaction. I rolled down my window as she approached, her highlighted blonde hair pulled back so tight it probably gave her a headache, wearing her typical white capri pants and a coral blazer that screamed, "I need to speak to the manager." "Can I help you?" she asked, even though she clearly knew exactly what was happening. "My gate code isn't working," I said, keeping my voice level. "Oh, that's because we changed all the codes yesterday. Didn't you get the email?" She pulled out her phone and made a show of scrolling through something. "No, Patricia, I didn't get any email about gate codes being changed." "Well, that's unfortunate. The new code is only available to homeowners who are current on their HOA dues and who don't have any outstanding violations." She smiled in that particular way that made my blood pressure spike. "I'm current on my dues. I have automatic payments set up." "Yes, but you have 17 violations that need to be addressed before you can receive the new code." She held up a folder that appeared out of nowhere, thick with papers. 17 violations? For what? "Your trash cans were visible from the street on a non-trash day. That's violation 1 through 8, as it happened 8 times in the past month. Your car was parked in your driveway overnight instead of in your garage. That's violation 9 through 14. Your mailbox flag was up for more than 4 hours on 2 occasions. That's 15 and 16. And your front door wreath is not in compliance with the approved seasonal decoration guidelines. That's 17. I stared at her, my hands gripping the steering wheel. "You're joking." "The HOA takes these matters very seriously, Mr. Xavier. Each violation carries a $50 fine. That's $850 in total. Once you pay and sign an agreement to maintain compliance, you'll receive the new code within 3 to 5 business days." 3 to 5 business days? Where am I supposed to stay until then? "That's not really the HOA's concern, is it?" Patricia's smile never wavered. "Now you're blocking traffic. Please move your vehicle." I looked in my rearview mirror at the growing line of cars. Some people were honking now. I put my car in reverse and carefully backed up, pulling to the side of the road outside the gate. My hands were shaking as I parked and pulled up my email on my phone. Sure enough, there was nothing about gate codes. I called my neighbor, Dave Morrison, who answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, Sebastian, what's up?" "Did you get an email about the gate codes changing?" "Yeah, it came through yesterday around 2. You didn't get it?" "No. And now Patricia is saying I can't have the new code because I have violations I've never heard about." Dave was quiet for a moment. "Man, that's rough. You need a place to crash?" "I need to get into my house, Dave. All my work stuff is in there. I have client meetings this afternoon." "Hold on, let me check something." I heard him typing. "Okay, so the email came from Patricia's personal email address, not the official HOA one. And looking at the distribution list, your name isn't on it." She deliberately left me off. "Looks that way. Listen, I hate to say this, but Patricia's had it out for you ever since the thing with the board meeting." The thing with the board meeting. 3 months ago, I'd attended an HOA meeting and pointed out that several board members, including Patricia, were approving contracts with companies owned by their relatives. I'd asked if that was a conflict of interest and suggested we get bids from other contractors. Patricia had shut down the discussion immediately, and the next week, I started getting violation notices for things I'd never been cited for before. "So what do?" I asked Dave. "Pay the fines, I guess, unless you want to fight it, but that could take months." I thanked Dave and hung up, then sat in my car thinking. The sun was getting higher and it was already pushing 90 degrees. I had all my equipment, my clothes, everything I needed inside my house. I also had something Patricia didn't know about, something my real estate attorney had discovered when I bought the property. When Meadowbrook Estates was developed 15 years ago, The builder needed access to the main road, which was privately owned by a local family. The builder negotiated an easement for construction vehicles. But here's where it gets interesting. The private road that connected to the main highway wasn't just an easement. It was a separate parcel that someone needed to own outright. The builder purchased it from the family, intending to eventually deed it to the HOA along with all the other common areas. That never happened. When the builder went bankrupt 7 years ago, the assets were liquidated. The common areas, the clubhouse, the pool, all of that went to the HOA as planned. But the access road, listed separately in the bankruptcy proceedings, was sold to an investment company that bought up distressed properties. That investment company held it for a few years, then sold it to another company, which eventually listed it for sale. My attorney found it during our title search. The access road, the only road in or out of Meadowbrook Estates, was for sale for $35,000. At the time, I thought it was interesting but didn't see the point in buying it. The HOA would certainly buy it themselves once they realized the situation. But my attorney, a sharp woman named Michelle Zhang, had advised me differently. "Buy it," she'd said. "You never know when having leverage with an HOA might come in handy." I'd thought she was being paranoid. I bought it anyway. Now, sitting outside my own neighborhood because Patricia Henderson wanted to play power games, I realized Michelle had been absolutely right. I made a call. Michelle Zhang Law Office. "Michelle, it's Sebastian Xavier. Remember that access road I bought? The one in Scottsdale? Of course. What's going on?" I explained the situation, and I could hear her shout through the phone. "Oh, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. The HOA has an implied easement to use that road based on years of continuous use, but since you're the actual property owner, you have the right to regulate its use as long as you're not completely blocking access. You can set reasonable terms and conditions." "What kind of terms?" "Well, you could require a usage fee. You could set hours. You could require permits. The key is that whatever you do has to be reasonable enough that a court wouldn't override it, but restrictive enough to make your point. I don't want to hurt my neighbors. This is about Patricia and the board. Then we'll be surgical about it. Let me draw up some documents. Can you be at my office in an hour?" I looked at the gate, at Patricia still standing there chatting with someone else now, probably telling them all about how she'd put me in my place. "I'll be there in 45 minutes. Michelle's office was in downtown Scottsdale, a sleek modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows. She had the documents ready when I arrived, along with a strategy that made me want to hug her. "So you're going to notify the HOA board that is the owner of the private access road. You're implementing new usage guidelines effective immediately. All users must display a valid permit obtained from you at no cost. Permits will be issued to all residents in good standing. The HOA board members will need to apply for permits individually." "And what are the requirements for a permit?" "Proof of residency, current vehicle registration, proof of insurance, and a clean record with regard to any legal disputes or harassment allegations within the community." Michelle's eyes sparkled. "You're also going to require that all permit holders agree to use the road in a safe and courteous manner and refrain from any discriminatory practices." Patricia's going to lose her mind. Patricia is going to have a choice. Drive 20 miles around to the next entrance to the subdivision behind yours and cut through, adding 40 minutes to any trip, or comply with your very reasonable requirements. Is this legal? Completely. You own the property. You have the right to regulate its use. The only thing you can't do is completely deny access, which you're not doing. You're setting reasonable conditions. Some HOAs do worse things to their residents every day. We spent the next hour finalizing everything. Michelle drafted an official notice that would be delivered to every household in Meadowbrook Estates, as well as a separate certified letter to the HOA board. She also prepared a permit application form and created a simple online system where residents could apply. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had everything I needed. Michelle had also made a few calls and found me a contractor who could install a simple arm gate at the entrance to my road, the kind you'd see at a parking garage within a week. The current gate at the subdivision entrance doesn't actually sit on your property, Michelle explained. Your road extends from the highway to about 50 feet before their gate. So you'll put your gate at the entrance to your property, and everyone will have to pass through your gate to get to theirs. It was petty. It was beautiful. It was completely legal. I couldn't get into my house that night, so I checked into a hotel and used the business center to send out the notices. By 6 o'clock, every resident of Meadowbrook Estates had received an email explaining the situation. By 7 o'clock, my phone was ringing off the hook. Dave called first. "Dude, are you serious? You own the road?" Completely serious. And unlike Patricia, I'm not charging anyone or making it difficult. Just apply for the free permit online and you're good to go. "I'm doing it right now. This is amazing." Other neighbors called with similar reactions. Most of them thought it was hilarious, especially once I explained why I was doing it. A few were concerned about the long-term implications, and I assured them that as long as the HOA stopped harassing me, everything would go back to normal. Patricia called at 8:30. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. By the fifth call, I answered. "Mr. Xavier, this is completely unacceptable. You can't just block access to an entire neighborhood." "I'm not blocking access, Patricia. I'm requiring permits, which are free and easy to obtain. Just like you changed the gate codes without proper notice, I'm implementing new road usage guidelines. The difference is, my requirements are actually reasonable." "This is extortion." "No, this is property rights. I own that road. I have the deed. I have the title insurance. And I have a very good attorney who assures me everything I'm doing is completely legal. The board will fight this. The board is welcome to try. In the meantime, I notice that you and the other board members don't meet the requirements for permits, what with the ongoing disputes and harassment allegations. You might want to start figuring out your alternate route. I hear the drive through Sunset Ridge is lovely this time of year, if a bit long." I hung up before she could respond. It felt good, really good. The next morning, I drove out to the entrance of my road and met with the contractor Michelle had hired. His name was Jim Patterson, a weathered guy in his 50s who'd been installing gates and access control systems for 30 years. "So you want something that's going to last but can be removed if needed?" he asked, walking the property line. "Exactly. Something professional, something that makes it clear this is private property with controlled access, but nothing permanent that's going to cause problems down the line." "I've got just the thing. We'll do a basic arm gate with a keypad and card reader. I can have it up by Friday. You want cameras?" "Absolutely. We'll put cameras at the entrance and exit, tie them into a cloud system so you can monitor remotely. The whole thing will run you about $8,000. "Do it." Jim got to work, and I drove around to the back entrance Dave had mentioned. Sure enough, if you drove through Sunset Ridge subdivision, you could cut through their streets and come out near the back of Meadowbrook Estates. It added about 35 minutes to the trip, but it was doable. I made the drive and finally got home around 10 in the morning, exhausted but satisfied. My house looked exactly as I'd left it. I made coffee, took a shower, and logged into my work computer. I had a dozen messages from clients, but nothing that couldn't wait. I also had over 100 permit applications from my neighbors. I spent the afternoon approving them, which took about 30 seconds each. Proof of address, valid ID, that was all I needed. By evening, I'd approved 90% of the applications. The HOA board members' applications were notably absent. That Friday, Jim finished installing the gate. It was perfect. A sleek black arm that raised and lowered smoothly, with a professional-looking keypad and card reader beside it. The cameras were discreet but visible, and the whole setup looked like it had been there for years. I programmed in the codes for all the approved permit holders and sent out an email letting everyone know the new system was active. I also included clear instructions. Pull up to the gate, enter your 6-digit code or scan your permit card, wait for the arm to raise, drive through. Simple. Michelle had advised me to be present for the first few days to handle any issues, so I set up a folding chair near the gate and brought a cooler of water. The first car came through at 6:30 in the morning, Mr. Patterson from 3 streets over. The gate worked perfectly. He waved at me as he drove past. By 8 o'clock, the morning rush was in full swing. Everyone seemed to have their codes memorized, and the gate was handling the traffic smoothly. A few people stopped to chat, thanking me for standing up to the HOA. One woman, Mrs. Sarah O'Neill, who lived 2 doors down from me, brought me coffee and a bagel. We've all been waiting for someone to push back against Patricia, she said. She's made life miserable for half the neighborhood. Last month she cited me for having non-conforming flowers in my front bed. They were roses. She said they were the wrong shade of red. That's insane. That's Patricia, so thank you for this. And if you need anything at all, let me know. The real test came at 9:15 when Patricia's silver Mercedes pulled up to the gate. She was alone, and I could see her typing on the keypad. The gate didn't move. She tried again. Still nothing. She laid on her horn, a long, obnoxious blast that echoed across the desert. I walked over to her car. She rolled down her window, her face red. "This gate isn't opening." "That's because you haven't been issued a permit, Patricia." "I live here." "And you're welcome to apply for a permit like everyone else. The application is online. It takes about 5 minutes. I'm on the HOA board. I don't need a permit to use this road." "This isn't HOA property. It's my property. And yes, you absolutely need a permit." "This is harassment." "No, Patricia, this is what harassment looks like when it's directed back at you. You changed my gate code, locked me out of my home, and tried to extort $850 from me over made-up violations. All I'm asking is that you fill out a simple form." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "I'll have my lawyer call your lawyer." "Please do. Michelle Zhang is expecting your call. In the meantime, you're blocking traffic. You need to move." Patricia reversed aggressively, nearly hitting the car behind her, and peeled off toward the alternate route. The car behind her, driven by a man I didn't recognize, pulled up and entered his code without issue. He gave me a thumbs up as he drove through. Over the weekend, I received permit applications from 4 of the 5 board members. All of them were approved within minutes. Patricia's application never came. Monday morning, I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 men in suits standing on my porch. "Sebastian Xavier?" "That's me." "I'm Detective Robert Morrison with the Scottsdale Police Department, and this is Detective James Chen. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the access gate you installed." My stomach dropped. "Of course. Come in." We sat in my living room, and Detective Morrison pulled out a notebook. "We received a complaint from Patricia Henderson. She claims you're illegally blocking access to a public road. The road isn't public. It's private property that I own. I have the deed and all the documentation." I pulled out the folder Michelle had prepared for exactly this situation. Detective Chen looked through the papers carefully. "This all appears to be in order. You're the legal owner of this parcel?" "Yes, I bought it 3 years ago. It was sold separately during a bankruptcy liquidation." "And you're not denying anyone access?" "No. I've issued free permits to 98% of the residents. The only people who haven't received permits are those who haven't applied or who have ongoing legal disputes with other residents." "That would include Mrs. Henderson?" "Mrs. Henderson has an ongoing dispute with me. She deliberately excluded me from a gate code change notification, locked me out of the neighborhood, and attempted to charge me for false violations. Until that dispute is resolved, her permit application is on hold." The detectives exchanged glances. Detective Morrison closed his notebook. "Mr. Xavier, while Mrs. Henderson's complaint is technically not a police matter, she's also filed allegations that you're running an illegal extortion scheme." "I'm not charging anyone anything. The permits are free." "We understand that. However, Mrs. Henderson claims you threatened to block all access unless she dropped the HOA violations against you." "That's completely false. I never threatened anything. I simply exercised my property rights to control access to land I own. If Mrs. Henderson would like to resolve our dispute through mediation or by dropping the fraudulent violations, I'm happy to have that conversation." Detective Chen stood up. "We'll include all of this in our report. For what it's worth, Mr. Xavier, it doesn't appear you've done anything wrong. Property owners have the right to control access to their land, as long as they're not completely preventing egress. But I'd recommend you keep detailed records of everything, just in case this escalates." "I am. Thank you, detectives." After they left, I called Michelle. She laughed when I told her about the visit. "Patricia's getting desperate. That's good. Let her waste time and money on legal threats that won't go anywhere. In the meantime, keep doing exactly what you're doing. You're in the right here." "What if she tries something else?" "Like what? She's already played most of her cards." Unless she wants to file a civil suit, which would be expensive and which she'd lose, she's stuck. The HOA could try to purchase the road from you, but they'd have to offer fair market value, and given its strategic importance, that's probably going to be a lot more than the $35,000 you paid. How much are we talking? I'd say at least $200,000, maybe more. You control the only convenient access to a 150-home subdivision. That's valuable leverage. The idea started forming in my mind. What if I offered to sell it back to them? You could, but I'd recommend waiting until they come to you. Right now, you have all the power. Let them sweat. I took Michelle's advice and waited. Days turned into a week, then 2 weeks. The gate system was working flawlessly. Residents had gotten used to it, and many told me they actually preferred it to the old HOA gate because it was better maintained and more reliable. Patricia, meanwhile, was spending 90 minutes a day driving the long way around. I knew this because several neighbors gleefully reported seeing her Mercedes on the alternate route, and she'd been late to 2 HOA meetings as a result. 3 weeks after the gate went up, I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney, a firm called Bradshaw and Associates. The letter stated that the HOA board was prepared to discuss purchasing the access road and requested a meeting to negotiate terms. I forwarded it to Michelle. She called me within an hour. They're ready to deal. This is good. But we need to set the terms carefully. What's your goal here, Sebastian? Do you actually want to sell, or do you want to keep the leverage? I want Patricia Henderson off the board. I want the fake violations dropped, and I want a written guarantee that the HOA will never retaliate against me for any of this. That's reasonable. What about the other residents? Do you want any protections for them? Actually, yes. I've heard too many stories about Patricia abusing her position. Is there a way to require the HOA to implement better oversight? Maybe term limits for board members or a review process for violations? We can try. It would have to be written into the sale agreement as a condition. The HOA would have to amend their bylaws. It's a big ask, but given your leverage, they might go for it. Let's try. Michelle drafted a response outlining my conditions. The HOA would purchase the access road for $225,000, contingent on the following terms. Patricia Henderson would resign from the board immediately. All violations against me would be dropped with written confirmation that no retaliation would occur, and the HOA would amend its bylaws to implement term limits for board members, create an independent violations review committee, and require competitive bidding for all contracts over $5,000. The response was delivered to Bradshaw and Associates on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, I had an answer. The HOA board rejected the terms and threatened legal action if I didn't cease interfering with their operations. Michelle was unfazed. They're bluffing. Let them sue. It'll cost them $50,000 in legal fees just to get to trial, and they'll lose. But I was tired of the game. I'd made my point, and now it was time to end it. I had one more card to play, one that Michelle didn't know about yet. Over the past month, I'd been talking to my neighbors. Not just casual conversations, but real discussions about what they wanted from their HOA. It turned out that I wasn't the only one with grievances. Patricia and her board had been running Meadowbrook Estates like their personal fiefdom for 5 years, and people were fed up. Sarah O'Neill had been fined for her roses. Dave Morrison had been cited for parking his work truck in his driveway. The Gonzalez family had been told their kid's basketball hoop was a violation. The list went on and on. Arizona HOA law allows homeowners to petition for a special election to recall board members if they can get signatures from 20% of the homeowners. Meadowbrook Estates had 150 homes, which meant we needed 30 signatures. I got 67. The petition was filed with the HOA on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, Patricia was at my door. "You can't do this," she said without preamble. "Yes, I can. It's in the bylaws. 20% of homeowners can petition for a recall election." "You're destroying this community." "No, Patricia, I'm trying to save it from you. You've been abusing your position for years, and people are done with it. You can resign now, or you can wait for the recall election and be voted out. Either way, you're finished." Her face went through a series of expressions: anger, shock, and finally, something that might have been fear. You have no idea what you're doing. This community needs strong leadership. This community needs fair leadership. There's a difference." She turned and left without another word. I watched her walk back to her car, which was parked 3 houses down because she still couldn't use my gate. The recall election was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, I continued operating the gate, and life in Meadowbrook Estates took on a strange new normal. Most residents were supportive, stopping by to thank me or to share their own HOA horror stories. A few were concerned about the upheaval, worried that removing the board would create chaos. I assured them that the recall only applied to Patricia and 2 other board members who'd been complicit in her schemes. The other 2 board members, who'd often voted against Patricia's more egregious proposals, would remain to provide continuity. Sarah O'Neill decided to run for one of the vacant board positions. So did Dave Morrison. Both of them were well-liked in the community and had reasonable ideas about how the HOA should operate. A third candidate, a retired accountant named Mr. Gregory Shaw, also threw his hat in the ring, promising to bring financial transparency to the board. Patricia didn't go quietly. She sent out a neighborhood-wide email calling me a bully and a con artist. She claimed I was trying to take over the HOA for personal gain. She even suggested that I'd manufactured the whole situation by buying the road specifically to cause trouble. The email backfired spectacularly. Dozens of residents replied, all sharing their own negative experiences with Patricia. The thread became a virtual airing of grievances that went on for days. Someone created a shared document listing every questionable decision Patricia had made as board president. It ended up being 14 pages long. On the day of the recall election, turnout was almost 90%, unheard of for an HOA vote. The results weren't even close. Patricia and the 2 other board members were recalled with over 80% of the vote. Sarah, Dave, and Gregory were elected to replace them. The new board's first act was to drop all pending violations that had been issued in the past 6 months, pending a review by the newly formed Violations Committee. Their second act was to schedule a meeting with me to discuss the access road. We met at the clubhouse on a Tuesday evening. Sarah, Dave, Gregory, and the 2 continuing board members, Lisa Carmichael and Tom Richardson, sat across from me and Michelle at the conference table. "First," Sarah said, "I want to thank you on behalf of everyone in the community for what you did. Standing up to Patricia wasn't easy, and you took significant personal risk." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it needed to be done." "We understand," Dave added, "and we want to find a resolution that works for everyone. We've reviewed your terms for selling the access road back to the HOA." "And?" Michelle asked. "The price is steep but fair given the circumstances. We're prepared to meet it. The conditions, however, need some modification." I'd expected this. "What kind of modification?" Gregory pulled out a document. "We've already begun implementing the term limits in the Violations Review Committee. Those are good ideas that will make the HOA function better. The competitive bidding requirement is also already being drafted into the bylaws. What we'd like to modify is the prohibition on retaliation." "Modify it how?" "Expand it," Lisa said. "We don't just want to protect you from retaliation. We want to protect any homeowner who raises legitimate concerns about HOA operations. We're proposing a whistleblower protection clause that would be added to the bylaws." Michelle and I exchanged glances. "That's actually better than what we proposed," Michelle said. "We think so too," Tom said. "This community has been dysfunctional for too long because people were afraid to speak up. We want to change that culture." We spent the next hour hammering out the details. The final agreement included the purchase price of $225,000, the bylaw amendments, the whistleblower protection clause, and one additional item I requested. The HOA would issue a formal apology to me and drop all violations, not just against me, but against anyone who'd been unfairly targeted during Patricia's tenure. "Done," Sarah said. "We'll put it to a vote at the next general meeting." The vote passed unanimously 3 weeks later. The sale closed a month after that, and I deposited a check for $225,000, less Michelle's fees and the cost of the gate equipment. I ended up netting about $190,000, which wasn't bad for a $35,000 investment. More importantly, the gate came down, and Meadowbrook Estates began functioning the way an HOA should, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and staying out of people's lives unless absolutely necessary. Patricia, true to form, didn't take her recall gracefully. She filed a lawsuit against me for defamation, claiming I'd destroyed her reputation. Michelle had it dismissed within 2 months, and the judge ordered Patricia to pay my legal fees. She tried to fight that too, but eventually gave up when her own attorney advised her to cut her losses. The last I heard, Patricia moved to a condo in Phoenix where she couldn't be on an HOA board even if she wanted to. Her husband, who'd always seemed like a decent guy just trapped in a bad marriage, filed for divorce 6 months later. Life in Meadowbrook Estates improved dramatically under the new board. Violation notices dropped by 90%. The ones that were issued were for legitimate problems, houses that were genuinely falling into disrepair or situations that posed safety hazards. The community started having regular social events again, things that had fallen by the wayside when Patricia was in charge because she'd spent all the budget on legal fees and contracts with her friends' companies. Sarah O'Neill turned out to be an excellent board president, fair-minded and willing to listen to all sides of an issue. Dave focused on improving the common areas, organizing a community garden that became incredibly popular. Gregory did a deep dive into the HOA finances and found over $40,000 in questionable expenses from Patricia's tenure, including payments to contractors who'd never actually done the work they'd been paid for. That discovery led to a criminal investigation. The Scottsdale Police Department's white-collar crime unit got involved, and it turned out Patricia had been running a kickback scheme with several contractors. They'd submit inflated invoices, the HOA would pay, and Patricia would get 30% under the table. The scheme had been going on for 3 years and involved over $100,000 in fraudulent charges. I testified at the trial, as did several other homeowners. Michelle came with me for moral support, even though she wasn't directly involved in the criminal case. The trial lasted a week, and the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, bank records, testimony from contractors who'd flipped and agreed to cooperate in exchange for lighter sentences. Patricia Henderson was convicted on 8 counts of fraud and 2 counts of embezzlement. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus penalties. Her 2 co-conspirators on the old board got similar sentences. The day the verdict came down, I was sitting in my living room working on a new project for a client. My phone buzzed with texts from neighbors sharing the news. I felt relief more than satisfaction. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for everyone Patricia had wronged over the years. That evening, Sarah organized an impromptu gathering at the clubhouse. It wasn't a celebration of Patricia's conviction exactly, but more of a recognition that the community had come through a difficult period and emerged stronger. About 50 people showed up, bringing food and drinks. Someone set up a projector and played old photos from happier times in the neighborhood, back before Patricia's reign of terror. I stood in the corner, talking with Dave and Gregory, when Sarah clinked her glass and asked for everyone's attention. "I just want to say thank you to everyone who stood up and spoke out when it mattered," she said, "especially Sebastian Xavier, who literally owned the road we all drive on and used that leverage not for personal gain, but to help restore sanity to our community. Sebastian, this place is better because of you." People clapped, and I felt my face heat up. I'm not good with public recognition, but I appreciated the sentiment. When the applause died down, I raised my glass. I'm just glad we're all on the same road now, literally and figuratively. People laughed, and the party continued. I stayed for another hour, then walked home under the Arizona stars. My house looked warm and welcoming, and for the first time since I'd moved to Meadowbrook Estates, I felt like I truly belonged. The next few months were peaceful. I focused on my work, helped out with the community garden, and even joined the social committee to help plan a neighborhood block party. The block party was a huge success with over 200 people attending, including residents from Sunset Ridge, our neighbors who'd been gracious about all the extra traffic during the Patricia saga. Michelle and I stayed in touch. She'd become not just my attorney, but a friend, and we'd meet for coffee every few weeks to catch up. During one of those meetings, she brought up something I'd been thinking about but hadn't verbalized yet. "You know, Sebastian, What you did with the access road could be a model for other homeowners dealing with abusive HOAs. Not everyone will have the same leverage you had, but the principle is sound. Find where you have power, use it ethically but firmly, and don't back down from doing what's right. You think other people could benefit from hearing about this? Absolutely. HOA abuse is a huge problem across the country. Most people just suffer through it because they don't think they have any recourse. Your story shows that there are options, even when it seems like the HOA has all the power. I thought about that for a while. Eventually, I wrote up a detailed account of everything that had happened, from Patricia changing my gate code to her criminal conviction. I posted it on a few HOA reform forums and community websites. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out with their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking up. Some of those conversations led to real change in other communities. A man in Texas discovered that his HOA had been illegally using homeowner dues to pay for board members' personal expenses. He filed a complaint with the state attorney general, and the entire board was removed. A woman in Florida found out her HOA's management company had been systematically overcharging residents and pocketing the difference. Her investigation led to a class action lawsuit that recovered over $2 million for homeowners. These weren't my victories, not directly, but I felt connected to them. Standing up to Patricia had shown me that individual action matters, that one person refusing to be bullied can create ripples that spread far beyond their immediate situation. A year after the gate came down, Meadowbrook Estates held its annual meeting. The new board had been in place for 12 months, and the transformation was remarkable. The community's reserves were fully funded for the first time in years. Common area maintenance was up to date. The rules and regulations had been streamlined from 47 pages to 12, focusing on genuine community concerns rather than petty grievances. Sarah gave a State of the Community address that highlighted all the improvements. Then she announced something unexpected. The board was establishing the Sebastian Xavier Community Service Award to be given annually to a resident who embodied the values of fairness, integrity, and standing up for what's right. "And it gives me great pleasure," Sarah said, "to present the first award to its namesake, Sebastian Xavier." I walked up to receive a plaque, feeling embarrassed and honored at the same time. The inscription read, "For extraordinary courage and leadership in defending the rights and dignity of all community members." When I got home that night, I hung the plaque in my office where I could see it while I worked. It reminded me that even in the face of unreasonable opposition, even when the system seems rigged against you, there's always a way forward if you're willing to look for it. The access road, my road for that brief period, was now back in HOA hands where it belonged. The gate Patricia had used to lock me out was gone, replaced by a new system that was both more secure and more user-friendly. Every time I drove in or out of the neighborhood, I thought about those weeks when I'd controlled access, when I'd held all the cards. I could have been vindictive. I could have made life miserable for everyone, not just Patricia. But that wasn't the point. The point was to restore balance, to show that power doesn't have to corrupt, that leverage can be used for good. Patricia served 2 years of her 4-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to another state and was working as a retail manager. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, though I had my doubts. Some people never change. But the community changed. Meadowbrook Estates became a model for HOA governance, with other neighborhoods requesting copies of our bylaws and asking Sarah to speak at their meetings. The whistleblower protection clause was adopted by several other Arizona HOAs, and the state legislature even discussed making something similar mandatory for all homeowner associations. As for me, I continued living my quiet life, working from home, tending my small section of the community garden, and occasionally helping neighbors navigate disputes with the HOA. I'd become the go-to person for anyone who felt they were being treated unfairly, and I took that role seriously. Most issues could be resolved with a simple conversation and a reminder that the HOA existed to serve the community, not the other way around. 3 years after the Patricia saga ended, I was working in my office when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a young couple standing there, looking nervous. "Are you Sebastian Xavier?" the woman asked. "I am. Can I help you?" We're thinking about buying the house 3 doors down. The realtor told us about what happened here a few years ago, about you standing up to the HOA. We just wanted to meet you and ask, is this a good place to live? I invited them in and made coffee. We talked for over an hour about the community, the HOA, and what had changed. I was honest about the problems we'd faced and equally honest about how we'd solved them. So it's safe to say the HOA isn't going to make our lives miserable? The husband asked. Nothing in life is guaranteed, I said, but this HOA has solid bylaws now, good leadership, and a culture of accountability. If problems come up, there are mechanisms to address them. That's about the best you can hope for. They bought the house. On moving day, I helped them carry boxes, and that evening, Sarah organized a welcome dinner. The young couple, Marcus and Jennifer Sullivan, were overwhelmed by the hospitality. Jennifer told me later that they had lived in 3 different HOA communities before this one, and they'd never felt so welcomed. This place is special because of what you did, she said. This place is special because good people decided to make it that way, I replied. I just gave them an opportunity. That was the truth of it, really. I'd had leverage, yes, and I'd used it effectively. But the real change came from dozens of people deciding they deserved better and being willing to work for it. The petition signatures, the recall election, the new board members who stepped up to serve. All of that mattered more than any road I'd temporarily owned. Years passed. The community continued to thrive. I got older, my hair showing more gray, my daily runs getting a bit slower. But every morning when I left for those runs, I'd pause at the entrance to Meadowbrook Estates, at the spot where my gate had once stood, and I'd remember. I'd remember Patricia standing there with her smug smile, thinking she'd won by locking me out. I'd remember the flash of realization when I understood that I held the keys to something she needed more than I needed anything from her. I'd remember Michelle's laugh when I told her my plan and the satisfaction of watching everything come together. But mostly, I'd remember the lesson that ordinary people have more power than they think, that bullies only win when good people do nothing, and that sometimes the road to justice runs right through your own property. I never regretted buying that access road, even though it had cost me time, money, and considerable stress. It had been worth every penny and every sleepless night, because in the end, it wasn't about the road at all. It was about standing up, speaking out, and refusing to be pushed around by someone who thought their position gave them the right to mistreat others. Patricia Henderson had changed my gate code and locked me out, thinking she was teaching me a lesson. Instead, she'd learned one herself, that when you back someone into a corner, you'd better make sure they don't own the only road you need to get home. And that, as far as I was concerned, was the perfect ending to the story. Not with me lording my temporary power over anyone, not with revenge or spite, but with a community restored, justice served, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd done the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates. I still work from home, still help with the community garden, still serve as an informal advisor when HOA questions arise. My life isn't dramatically different from what it was before Patricia changed my gate code that Tuesday morning. But I'm different. I learned what I'm capable of when pushed, learned that principles matter more than comfort, and learned that one person really can make a difference. The plaque in my office has company now. Sarah's board commissioned a small monument for the community garden, a simple stone marker that reads, "In every community, there comes a time when someone must stand for what is right. May we all have the courage to be that person when our time comes." I pass that marker every time I work in the garden. It doesn't have my name on it, which is perfect. This was never about me. It was about Meadowbrook Estates, about every homeowner who'd been wronged by an abusive HOA, about creating a better way forward. The road is still there, of course. It's paved and maintained by the HOA now, with new curbs and landscaping. It looks good. But every time I drive on it, I think about those weeks when it was mine, when a $35,000 investment became the lever that moved an entire community. Would I do it all again? Without hesitation. Would I recommend others buy strategic parcels of land near their homes? That depends on the person and the situation. But would I tell people to stand up for themselves, to fight back against injustice even when it seems impossible, to use whatever leverage they have to make things right? Absolutely, every single time. Because at the end of the day, we all drive on the same roads, live in the same communities, and deserve to be treated with basic decency and respect. And if it takes owning the road to make that happen, then own the road. Just remember to use that power wisely, ethically, and always with the good of the community in mind. That's what I did. That's what worked. And that's the story of how the HOA changed my gate code and locked me out. Too bad for them I owned the road they all drove on.